Do you want to know how to ask for help or information in English? In this video, I'll teach you the most useful phrases for asking for things politely and effectively. Whether you're asking for help, directions, or even a favor, you'll feel confident speaking in any situation. Let's get started with our first group of phrases. These phrases can be used when asking for help in general, so these will work in most situations. Could you help me with? We've used could you because it's a bit more polite than can you. An example of how you might use this question: could you help me with my shopping bags? Could you help me with this task? Could you help me open the window? This can be used in any situation and is a nice polite way to ask for help. Would you mind giving me a hand? If you give someone a hand, it means you help them. When you say would you mind, that's very polite, but make sure you always use it with the ing. Would you mind giving me a hand? For example, would you mind giving me a hand with these bags? They're very heavy. Would you mind giving me a hand with my homework? I don't understand question number 10. Next, I was wondering if you could help me. When you say I was wondering if, that's a very polite way of asking for help. For example, I was wondering if you could help me fix my computer. Or I was wondering if you could help me fill out this form. Very nice, very polite way of asking someone for help. Be careful with the word order because a common mistake is for people to say, I was wondering if could you help me? It's not phrased like a question, it's phrased like a statement. I was wondering if you could help me. And the next one, could you do me a favor? If someone does you a favor, they do something to help you. For example, could you do me a favor and move that table? Or could you do me a favor and get that box out of the car? This one is a bit less formal, so you probably wouldn't use it in a professional situation unless you were very familiar with the other person. It's more common to use this one with friends and family. Could you do me a favor? The next category of phrases is things you can say when you're asking for information. This could be when you are on holiday, asking at a tourist information desk, maybe at the airport, the bus station, or just asking people on the street. Could you tell me? Again, we've used could you instead of can you to be more polite. For example, could you tell me what time the bus leaves? Could you tell me where to find the milk? The next one, do you know if? For example, do you know if the train is running today? Or do you know if there's a pharmacy on this street? So this is a good way of asking for information from someone, asking them if they know something that they can share with you. I'd like to know. So this is a good one if you are asking for information. For example, I'd like to know when checkout is. Or I'd like to know if you provide a free shuttle service to the airport. And finally, we've got would you mind again. Would you mind telling me? Remember, we've got that ing form. Would you mind telling me where the nearest bank is? Would you mind telling me what time the shop's open? This is an alternative to could you tell me, it's just a little bit more polite. Moving on now to asking for directions. This is really useful if you're on holiday or you're in a place that you're not familiar with. Could you show me the way to? Or could you tell me the way to? If you've got a map, for instance, you might say, could you show me? So could you show me on the map the way to the pharmacy? Or if you don't have a map, could you tell me? Could you tell me the way to the train station, please? You could also say, how do I get to? How do I get to the Natural History Museum? How do I get to the nearest train station? If you are at a bus or a train station, you can say, which bus or which train do I take to get to? For example, which bus do I take to get to the Natural History Museum? Or which train do I take to get to Manchester? Finally, if you want to find out if there's a particular place close to where you are, is there a near here? For example, is there a pharmacy near here? Or is there a hospital near here? And then your next question could be, how do I get there? Or could you tell me how I get there? If you're enjoying this video and finding these phrases useful, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I have lots more videos just like this with useful phrases that I really hope you'll enjoy. Now let's move on to our next category of phrases. These phrases can be used when you are asking for permission. So when you want to ask someone if it's okay for you to do something. Is it okay if I? With this one, we're going to use the simple form of the verb. Is it okay if I sit here? Is it okay if I open the window? A more simple way of saying this, could I? Could I open the window? Or could I sit here, please? Another one, a bit more polite. Would it be all right if? Would it be all right if I quickly use your phone? Would it be all right if I leave early today? And another one, again, a bit more polite. Do you mind if? Do you mind if I open the window? Do you mind if I smoke? So a few different ways of asking for permission to do things. All of them very polite and can be used in almost any situation. Next, we've got phrases you can use when you want to ask for clarification or if you need help in understanding something. Could you explain that again, please? You can say that if you didn't quite catch what the other person said. What do you mean by? If someone says something that you don't understand, you can say, what do you mean? For example, what do you mean by comprehensive report? Or you could simply say, what do you mean by that? If you're talking in more general about what they just said. I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean by that? This then invites the other person to explain in more detail or more clearly. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Could you repeat that? This is a useful one, very polite. Saying I'm sorry just adds to the politeness of what you're saying. Sorry, I didn't understand. Could you repeat that? And finally, would you mind going over that one more time? You'll notice again, because we've said would you mind, we've used ing. Would you mind going over that one more time? If you ask someone to go over something one more time, you're asking them to repeat. So this is really just another way of saying, could you repeat that? Would you mind going over that one more time? Our final category of phrases is things you might say when you want to ask for recommendations. Another really useful group of phrases for if you're on holiday. The first one, very simple. What would you recommend? You could ask this if you're at a restaurant and you want to ask the waiter or waitress what dish on the menu they would recommend for you. You could also ask it to your English teacher. Maybe they've told you that you need to improve your vocabulary. You could say, what would you recommend I do? How can I improve my vocabulary? Do you have any suggestions? Or do you have any recommendations? For example, do you have any suggestions for a good restaurant nearby? Or do you have any recommendations for great YouTube channels that help people learn English? Next, could you recommend a good? For example, could you recommend a good book that I could read on holiday? Or could you recommend a good restaurant to get some sushi? Finally, what's the best way to? For example, you might ask your teacher, what's the best way to improve my English? Or what's the best way to train my dog? Or what's the best way to plan a holiday? So in this way, we're asking the other person to recommend how they think we should do that particular thing. So now you've learned useful phrases for asking for things in English. Another thing that you might often have to do in an English-speaking country is make plans. But do you know some useful phrases that you can use to make plans in these situations? If you would like to learn these useful phrases, then I recommend that you watch this video next.